Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have liftoff.
My guest today is an innovator in the fashion industry, in the sustainable fashion space. As the founder of the UK's leading fashion rental platform, she has revolutionised how we consider fashion and has fundamentally changed consumers' behaviour by prioritising conscious consumption over ownership. Please welcome to the podcast, Victoria Prew. Just a quick one before we start. If you like listening to this episode, which I know you're going to, please like it and subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to share it to your group chat. I have sat down with so many incredible women. I genuinely, when I started this, I knew it was going to be something that I loved, but not like it's become my obsession. I'm like, which other women do I love? Who else do I want on? And yourself included in that. But I always like to start way back. I like to start, I'm sure there's a reason that women become entrepreneurs, and I'm curious to know whether that was something in childhood or it's something that you found along the way. So how did those early years look for you?
Firstly, I'm so happy to be here. I've listened to every episode religiously since you launched. So looking back now, I think I was built to be an entrepreneur. I was very naughty at school, much to my parents' dismay. I think I really wanted to learn by doing rather than being told. I had loads of kind of side hustles and mini companies that I started all through school. I was always interested in how I could make a bit of extra side money. At uni, I loved eBay. Before eBay was cool, I used to sell all my clothes on eBay. So I think I've always been quite entrepreneurial. I've always kind of gone against the grain. And I actually went into real estate before I started entrepreneurship, and I kind of was told you had to go into banking or law or property or one of these kind of traditional careers. And then at 25, I thought, okay, now's the time to give it a go. And that was 5-6 years ago.
So originally, real estate. So you got your master's in real estate, right? What was it about that? Was it, like you say, was that a kind of like, I should do something in that vein? Or was it like lighting a fire for you?
I think it was kind of tick the box, because at school, I remember the career advice was kind of so structured. No one at school said to me, entrepreneurship would suit you really well. What about starting a business?
Yes.
And there were definitely no women at that time that, kind of pre-social media that I saw online. So I went into real estate because I didn't really know what else to do. And then I qualified as what was called a chartered surveyor, and then handed my notice in literally the next day. And I think the bit of the story I kind of never talk about is that I actually had 3 ideas before I started HURR. I still think the other 2 are like going to be quite big businesses one day. But I had 3 business ideas, and I basically took 3 months out once I qualified and was like, okay, which one do I want to go after? And settled on HURR.
Wow, that's so interesting. So it was kind of like an instant thing that you were just like, great, I have this under my belt, but I know it's not for me. Yeah,
I think so. It was a very male-dominated industry. I was young, I was ambitious, and I just thought, okay, either I can stay in this corporate world, or my mum's an entrepreneur, and she always said to me, look, Tori, I wish I'd started a business at 25. She started her business at 42.
Right.
So I just thought, okay, it's such a luxury to be young enough. I didn't have a mortgage at the time. I had limited kind of things holding me down.
The responsibility.
Which is a big blocker, right? When you have, family, or you have a mortgage and bills to pay. I had none of that, and my risk appetite was so high. I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this a couple of months, and if I can get it off the ground by, at that point, Christmas, I'll give it a go, and if not, I can go back to being in property. I had little to lose, and I think when I look back now, I was so naive, but I was so sure that I wanted to give it a go, and that's how it all started.
It's kind of like a beautiful place to be when you are, like, when you look back, you're like, God, I had no idea what was ahead of me. But I think sometimes you almost need that level of like
ignorance is bliss.
Ignorance, right? Absolutely, because if you knew the kind of the shit it takes, it could change your mind. And if you're passionate 100%. About something, you kind of don't want that in the way, because the passion has to do the doing at the start. I think it's interesting that you touch on your mum. So your mum was an entrepreneur. Do you think that growing up and seeing that around you rubbed off in some way, or did it sort of show you that actually you don't have to conform, you can spread your wings into other places?
Yeah, I think she was kind of before her time in lots of respects. I had 2 very driven parents as my role models. And I think my mum was always like, why not? Why not give it a go? And yeah, I kind of, once I got my professional qualification, I really had little to lose in that regard. So yeah, absolutely. We also don't really talk about this, but she actually worked for HURR for the first kind of 3-4 years.
Amazing.
And we have quite a young team. You know, I obviously started HURR at 25, which is very young looking back. And she has that experience, you know, when you feel the high highs and the low lows, she's a bit more stable. So I think that's been quite helpful in those like early days of setting
and
up.
grounded. And I suppose, who do you trust more in that setting than your mum, right? And if you
sometimes she's like, I told you so, when things don't work out. But other than that,
I mean,
we're
we
a
all
pretty
do
good
that
match.
as mums. You kind of can't hide from that. And you actually given me confidence, because I always think, what will my children do and how will that look? And I'm aware that I work a lot, and of course I'm around a lot too, but you know, if we're in the car, I'm probably on the phone and I'm doing a little call on the way to gymnastics club, because it's easier to do it there.
Of course,
and because I want to do that and I want to be there for them, but actually having you kind of absorb that in the most positive way.
Yeah, 100%. There was no such word as no, and I've kind of grown up with that.
Yeah, and you need that. That is something that we all need to hear. I'm so interested in HURR and the sort of creation of HURR, and how that kind of was the idea and the light bulb that went off for you. Was fashion always a big part of your life when you were younger?
Honestly, not really. The bit of fashion that I've resonated with most is wanting things that I couldn't afford, right? I'm a millennial myself. I rented my car, I rented my house. I'd watched that massive rise of the sharing economy, Airbnb, Uber. I was like, okay, we're all sharing our houses, our travel. Why are we not sharing our wardrobes? I have, had nearly 10 weddings last year. I want to wear something new for every single one of those weddings. So age 25, I was like, wouldn't it be cool if we could access fashion, but for a fraction of the price? And I think, looking back to my point on eBay, I was always interested in how you could kind of monetize things that you already owned and have that kind of side hustles. So age 25, when I started, I was like, okay, I think renting could be a real thing in fashion, but no one's really looked at it through a tech lens. So literally from line one of code, my co-founder and I built the platform in a basement in Shoreditch for our first 9 months of HURR's history. And we basically wanted to test the assumption that people would rent clothes. And even my best friends at the time were like, Tori, do we want to share clothes? Is that not weird? Like, what's going to happen about dry cleaning? What happens if something gets damaged? Questions I've been asked a million times and have perfected, and hopefully we've done a good job of solving. But really it was born from a belief that fashion fundamentally needed to go from a linear model where you bought something, wore it, and then throw it away, or it stood in the back of your wardrobe and kind of had dust on it for years to come. I was like, this is madness in this industry. I want to be able to access something for a fraction of the price and then send it back when I'm done. And that was kind of the start of HURR.
It's so brilliant. It's so genius. Because obviously it's fashion, but of course it's so tech driven. Was tech a big part of your life before you're developing an app and you're heading down that route? Was tech a big part of what you were doing?
100%. We always say we're a tech business before we're a fashion business. I care hugely about product, tech, and the innovation that actually happens in the HURR platform. We're basically running 3 separate businesses under one roof, and we have a business and a platform that is as functional as an Airbnb. So you can rent your wardrobe, you can rent from me. It's peer reviewed. We have like biometric facial scanning recognition so that the ID verification process is smooth. Really everything from a tech point of view we have built ourselves. We own the IP around, and it's something that I spend a lot of my time focused on. So I am in every single meeting to do with actually how we scale up our product. We ship features every 2 weeks, trying to make it better. So I think the platform will never truly be done. I've still got a long way to go, and I'm 5.5, 6 years in. But tech has always been a huge, huge focus. And that was our USP, right? People had tried to do fashion rental, but it had never really worked.
Right.
And my kind of thesis was, okay, if we built the tech that really got this right, it felt luxury, it felt accessible, but it felt kind of easy to use.
That when it comes to tech,
that is key, right?
For someone that is like technophobe, you could say, you just want ease, don't you? You want simplicity.
Exactly, no friction.
Yeah, exactly that. So one thing that I really admire about this whole story is that I think part of the great thing about being an entrepreneur is you're not always reinventing the wheel. You're putting your own spin on something and you're noticing a problem. You know, you are sometimes the consumer with the problem that actually is like, I like this, but why aren't they doing it like X? So for you, there wasn't anything for you to really model yourself on. There wasn't somebody that is like, okay, this is the Stateside. I know it was, what was the company Stateside that
Ran the Runway.
Right. So, but doing it differently to you.
Yeah.
There was nowhere here for you to go, okay, this is how we should do it, but we should do it different. So you were really innovating, but also completely learning on the job. There wasn't that kind of target that you were like, we need to be that company, but just do it a little bit different.
Yeah, it was completely, I think it was a blessing in disguise. When I remember vividly, when I first pitched the idea of HURR, I found like some loose guy on LinkedIn that I thought might be helpful, and he agreed to have a coffee with me. And I was so excited, and I rocked up with my pitch deck. I printed it out, and I'd washed my hair, and I was wearing a suit. And he rocked up in his gym kit and kind of looked at the first page, and I started talking. And he was like, "Look, can I tell you my honest opinion?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And he said, "I think sustainability is a trend, not a movement, and I think this is not going to work." And I was like, "Look." We'll call him Pete. With all due respect, I think that sustainability and the circular economy is a movement and not a trend. And I think 5 and a bit years later, here we are. The impacts of fast fashion are on the front page of every single newspaper. And I think I trusted my gut. I wanted to prove him wrong, but a lot of people wrong. And lots of people that we kind of went with the idea to, they were like, not sure this could work. So I think one of the key takeaways of looking back was look at outside of your industry. Airbnb is a world-class example of sharing houses. I took inspiration from fashion brands, from beauty brands, from positioning point of view. I took inspiration from tech, from some of the biggest tech platforms in the world. And you had your kind of 5 ideas of inspiration and thought, okay, if I could merge this into one platform called HURR.com, could it work? And that's where we started.
It's just genius. It's so, so clever. I want to sort of rewind a little bit because I've got so many HURR-related questions. You've got this basement. This is how you are, bringing her to us. You've got a basement space. You're working out how this app's going to change everyone's lives. How do you go from masters in real estate to being able to be front and center of developing a tech app? Like there's that in-between transition.
No one starts as an expert, right? Like you weren't an expert podcast host. I wasn't an expert in sustainable fashion. You become an expert with experience and time. And I remember thinking, how am I the right person to build this business? I have to prove it, right? I've got no track record. A degree in business and then a master's in real estate is not going to really help me in fashion rental and tech, right? So I always get asked, how do you know it's the right time to jump ship or to go like full in on an idea, right? And it's a really interesting question. For me, I said, okay, I'm going to give this 6 months. I'm going to move back in with mum and dad and I'm going to give it 6 months of my time. And after 6 months, I want an MVP, so a minimum viable product, which is the ugliest, cheapest version of what I want to create. And I want to hit a couple of thousand people on a waiting list. And then at that point, I'm going to go and try and raise some money. And that's exactly what we did. So for 6 months, I invested what was a very small amount of savings that I had in the idea and the actual tech build. And then I spent my time trying to rally people that I thought could be our potential customers to sign up to a waiting list. And after that 6 month period, we had 10,000 people that had signed up to our waiting list, a couple of hundred transactions that were really, when we're talking bare minimum, they were on WhatsApp chat, they were on a Google Excel spreadsheet of actually connecting, my blazer with you and putting the money through a PayPal. It was really bot's job, but I always say to people, start with the cheapest, quickest version of what you want to build. And then once you've got some traction, whether that's 100 transactions, 1,000 transactions, a waiting list of 100,000 people, whatever it might be, when you believe that you've got traction, that's the point to go all in.
That's the moment. Do you know what's so interesting? I spoke to Michelle Kennedy, Peanut, who we love, and she, alludes to what you're saying, and she said that actually, before you the app's the end product, right? So
Yeah.
before you get to the app, she has lots of people asking her, like, you know, shiny ideas, which are amazing, but test it in real life. Like
100%.
build the WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
See if you can get people engaged by inviting them to a dinner, or
Yeah.
just see if there's that desire for what
Yeah.
it is that you're trying to build before
Yeah.
thinking, okay, let's start with the app.
100%. I think to keep the customer voice in every meeting and at every point in your decision making is really crucial. I don't know about you, but when you have so many decisions to make in the day, it's sometimes easy to actually lose sight of
Yes.
the customer. So whether it's a CS executive or our head of customer service, they are sat in the tech meeting, in the marketing meeting with the voice of the customer. And I think whenever you're at that point of, we need to make a decision, what does the customer want, right? And they give you brutal feedback. They are not prepared, they're not afraid to kind of tell you what they think, right? And that has been one of the biggest learnings for me. There have been times where I've got so distracted that I've kind of lost sight of the customer. We now have a WhatsApp community for our top lenders. So when you hit certain criteria, a bit like being a super host on Airbnb,
Right.
you become a top lender on HURR. This WhatsApp chat is so valuable. It pops off all hours of the day, and they are giving us such interesting feedback on what they love, what they hate, what they want to see more of, what they want to see less of. And I really think it's our biggest moat of defensibility, because every hour, every minute, we've got real-time user insight, and that is really, really critical.
Which touches back on that community word, doesn't it? Time
100%.
and time again, which is so important to brands, to businesses. And I feel there's a real shift in that now, but I feel like there were so many years where people didn't, it was like, this is the brand, it was like a board level discussion, and this is what should happen, this, or, you know, a marketing team, and this is what we think should work, rather than tapping into the very user or the very consumer, you know, which seems like a wild idea. Like, you have the perfect focus group.
Yeah.
Why not use them?
100%. Did you see Refi did their community trip versus an influencer trip? I think community is an overused word, but the focus has never been more critical than now, right? So how can you meet your customers? Is it real time? Is it the WhatsApp chat? WhatsApp is free, right? We get amazing insights, and that costs us nothing. So how can you kind of have those touch points for your customer, post-purchase feedback? All of this stuff will only make your product better. So if you're in those early days of launching a business and you've got your first 10 transactions, call every single customer. I called and spoke to every single person that had either rented or lent through our platform, because I wanted to speak to them in real time and understand what they loved, what they hated. And I wish I could do it at scale, but it's slightly more difficult these days. But if you're a new entrepreneur just starting, call every single customer.
That's such a brilliant idea. That is such like a brilliant bit of advice. Let's go back to those early days. That initial kind of, like you say, you're testing this, it's, in your words, a bit of a botch job where you're PayPal and this, and you're on WhatsApp and you're bringing people together like that. The point where you know that you're onto something and you're testing this, what did that initial investment take? How did that look?
From a financial point of view.
Yeah.
So we raised our first pre-seed round, which is, I've got an idea, I've got, 10,000 people on the waiting list and a couple of hundred transactions. The first round we raised was £300,000, which at 25 was a huge amount of money. I remember seeing it enter our, her bank account, thinking,
wow,
pressure is on, right?
Yeah, of course.
And that was Family Office and Angel. We've gone on to raise multiple rounds and done kind of big VC rounds now. But that gave me enough capital to build, to make two key hires. One was in kind of commercial and partnerships to help me drive the marketing and how the business would actually work. And then my first hire was a guy called Ollie, who's been absolutely instrumental to our success, who was my head of product. So he literally sat with me in that basement, building out the tech. And they were the first two hires. And we did everything. We had these kind of sexy titles like CEO and head of product.
It's always the case.
But we were on the phone to customers. We were dry cleaning dresses ourselves. We were doing everything it takes. And I think that is so interesting to touch on, because you're right, there's a lot of this like that sounds sexy, and it become, a CEO
sounds like a lovely title, but what that means at some point is like you are in, you are cleaning, you are that. It
100%.
takes everything.
Yeah, we always joke that the CEO is the least sexy role in a business. It's the sexiest title, and it's the least sexy in terms of
gorgeous.
what you actually have to do. So I completely agree.
In that first round of raising, because we talk about this, you know, females being so underfunded, particularly in the tech space. Was there a lot of no's before you got that yes?
So that first round, looking back, was a fairly straightforward round.
Right.
I mean, the stats on VC are pretty dire, right? We've got 2% of funding goes towards female founders, which is not good at all, and massively needs to change. My piece of advice whenever I'm asked about fundraising, whether you're a male or a female founder, is finding people that are ahead of you in that journey. So the reason I had a fairly straightforward round is because I had befriended someone who had raised from one of the investors that I ended up taking money from.
Right.
I had no idea, right? I had an idea. I was so driven and so sure that this was what I wanted to spend my next couple of years doing, that I think that enthusiasm and drive definitely came through to investors, but they're taking a punt, right? They've got no idea. You know, I'm a girl with an idea. I'm 25 and no experience, right? It's easy now to look back and see someone as, you know, successful or who's gone through multiple raises. Back then, my investors genuinely believed that I could build something and trusted me to do so. So, finding founders that have done this before will be the single biggest shortcut to your success, right? I want to be able to call up a Michelle Kennedy, a Tessa, the CEO of Olio, and say, okay, Michelle, I've been offered these terms for £300,000. Are they fair? What do you think? What was your experience? And she'll give me advice. I'll never forget that completely changed the course of making sure that I was getting into bed with the right people, that I was making the right decisions. So I really believe that when it comes to running a business as a female, whether that is raising money or actually building a company, that knowledge is power, right? You're only as good as what you know. Back then I knew very little. Got clued up pretty quickly when I entered the game of raising money, because it is full on. But finding people ahead of you that you can call up and ask has been absolutely mission critical.
I think, and you're like, this is where the power of woman is so special, because like you say, you call someone like a Michelle and she's like, this is the advice, this is what you shouldn't do. That doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
And when those moments, when you find that girl that's got your back in a room that you're not in,
They're in.
You know what I mean? And they're so special, but that doesn't always happen. And I find that so interesting about women. And I actually chatted to Emma Greed about this. She would say that her husband would be on the phone, like going to like non-friends, not even friends, and saying, you've got to connect with this person and this person could be great for you. But there's something with women that sometimes there can be that little bit of reluctancy in which you think, okay, if I help that person, that might take food off of my table. You find those little gems that you're like, gosh, could we all not have this? And that's the very reason that this podcast was born, because the idea of connecting women and bringing everybody together is so special, but also it kind of, it's not as common as you'd hope, right?
Yeah, I think it comes back down to scarcity versus abundant mindset, right? I remember vividly at 25, and often when I meet younger entrepreneurs, they're kind of worried to share their ideas. People might copy them, etc. I've learned 6 years into this game that there is room for everyone, and actually there are very few amount of women that are really changing the game. We need to support each other, back each other, mention each other's names in rooms. It is absolutely so important, and have each other on speed dial. But I built that network, right? I had no idea. I'm very grateful to Michelle, who was a few stages ahead of me, but I DM'd people, I voice noted people on Instagram being like, I'm starting this business. It's quite lonely. I'm feeling quite isolated. I'm not really an anxious person, but I remember that feeling of anxiety and putting an idea out into the world, right? People are happy to align with you when it's great and it's successful and that you've raised money.
So true.
In the early days when it's you in the basement, it's really lonely. So yes, there are amazing groups like the Stack World, which I love, where you can kind of connect as entrepreneurs or women in business, but build your own network. Find 5 people that are at a similar stage that you're following on Instagram, and build your own people that are your top 5 speed dials.
Do you think we move in a time now where people are, like you said, maybe anxious or maybe a little bit too proud to, and that fear of kind of like embarrassing themselves, I suppose, or like failing loudly. And that's where that kind of embarrassment comes from, that we don't put ourselves out there enough. Like, oh gosh, I'm not going to send her that message because she might think X, Y, and Z. Where actually, you know yourself, if somebody messaged you tomorrow and said, hi, Victoria, I'm thinking of this, that, and the other, I'm at an early stage, you would love to, like that desire to help when you have had that is kind of something that for everybody, we want to be on the phone, we want to be doing that more than probably that we have time to. So do you think it's something that we don't do enough? We don't put ourselves in rooms that could help us. We don't send that DM. We don't make that call because of fear of embarrassment.
100%. I think if you don't ask, you don't get, right? That's always been my mentality. If you want something, you've got to go and make it happen. I think you touched upon something really interesting, which is that kind of embarrassing feeling of what if this fails?
Yeah.
And I think looking back, I knew how difficult it was to get to business. Very few companies get to £1 million revenue, £10 million revenue, like serious milestones in business. It is like all the odds are stacked against you. And now you're a woman too, right? It's not an easy
and there's
game.
Another one.
So I remember thinking, okay, is my life going to be over if this goes bust or it doesn't work? And I had some really hard conversations with myself that I think was quite mature for a 25-year-old of, if this doesn't work out, am I going to cry about it or am I fundamentally going to be fine? And I knew that I had a career and a kind of job to go back to. But that fear of failure I took out because I was like, this is not a helpful fear to have. I'm going to give it my all. And I think it's admirable for anyone who gives it a go. And if it doesn't work out, they go and do something else, right? We see this with men all the time. Like how many times have you heard the Silicon Valley tech bros, they failed, they've gone bankrupt, and now they're coming back and they're starting a new co-working space, right? So I want that same, and I hope that I can role model to other female founders. We have to lose this fear of failure. You don't need to tell everyone about your ideas. You don't need a press article and that you're launching X app until you're ready to do so. You can build in private. If you're really, really unsure and you're anxious and you're a bit worried, this might not be the thing, build it quietly. You don't have to always be loud. And I've seen people get to 500k revenue and then kind of talk about the story. So I think you can go from the face of the brand and go down the track I went down. You can also be quiet. So I think it's interesting to look at different ways of that. I think the last point on this is the higher you climb, the further you fall, right? I think when you've got little to lose, that's the time to give it a go. I think actually, if anything, I feel more pressure now 6 years on than I did back in the day because I have a team that I'm responsible for. We have big investors and I have big shareholders that, you know, are investing in me to
be happy.
For a return, right? So that pressure changes, but if the worst thing that's going to happen is that it fails, giving it a go will be the best thing you do.
Of course. And you're so right. It's like the pressure only builds, but it'd be a different level and a different type of pressure.
Sure.
So if you can remove that layer, which is almost like ego, isn't it?
It is.
It's almost that kind of ego of it all. If you can remove that pressure, because there's going to be all different kinds that are thrown at you. You know, this, we haven't met this, or this hasn't worked, or, you know, this didn't go down as well as we thought. There's going to be so many different roller coaster rides along the way that actually worrying about not starting. I actually spoke to one of my girlfriends the other day. She's got like a clothing brand and it's relatively small and they're just starting to really gain some traction. Yeah. And she's kind of putting different levels of pressure on herself. Deadlines. So she's like, right, I need this dress out by this date, and if we don't get this, I'm like, but nobody knows the dress is coming at the end of the week. Why don't you just wait? Why don't you just, you've got next week. Like, if you're stretching everything to make this happen, nobody else yet knows about this. So you don't have, like you say, there's ways of being like going and striking while the iron's hot, but not thinking that everybody knows everything that's up here. Yeah. Because we do that, don't we? This has to happen because I said I was going to do this. No, guess what? No one else knows.
Yeah.
You've got time, make it right.
I think we're the same, right? We put so much pressure on ourselves because we've got, you know, publicly we want to keep things going and we've got a lot to prove to ourselves, to everyone else as well, right? And I think I have suffered from extreme burnout over the years of running a business. I really believed when I was young and naive that a business was a sprint and not a marathon. I was like, sprint. Why is everyone being slow? Like, what's the problem here? I have learnt the hard way that building a long-term sustainable business is a marathon and not a sprint. So when you're putting pressure on yourself, you need to put the right pressures on yourself that's realistic. And self-care isn't selfish. It's one of my favourite phrases.
I couldn't agree with you more.
There is no business without you. And I've learned that the hard way. So you should tell your friend that, be kind to herself, right? Set realistic. It's day by day. It's step by step. It's project by project versus this big goal that feels so hard to reach. You don't even know where to start, right? I remember feeling that too.
And it is hard to reach when you're going for like, okay, we're starting here, but I've got to get there overnight. It's pretty unrealistic. And if that does happen, I've got other friends that has happened for.
Yeah.
The journeys and the things that happen along the way, because then you're not quite ready to fulfill that. Because all of a sudden you've got this influx of orders that you actually can't meet.
Of course.
You've got to just go easy on the pressure, because there's going to be enough. There's for sure going to be enough on the way. I know how, like we touched on, being a CEO, it's the least sexy job of all, because you've got to do everything. I want to talk about your day-to-day role now at HURR.
Yeah. So I've gone from doing every single job and being in the detail of everything to a size and a scale where there is a lot that happens without me even knowing, and it's a really, really weird shift. It's wonderful because I've got a team that I really, really trust delivering and that believe in our vision and our mission. But it's a really weird shift, right? When you go from a basement of a couple of you to actually not the doing, but the kind of deciding and the thinking about what's next. So I remember vividly a couple of months ago, there was a platform that we have internally, and I had never been into this part of the platform and I couldn't solve a problem. Right. And I was like, isn't that a weird thing, right? The business you start now has a system that I wasn't familiar with. And I remember thinking, that felt weird and good in the same way, right? So I think, like, now I spend much more of my time building the business externally. So I spend a lot of my time with existing investors, thinking about the strategy, thinking about our international plans, the growth of the business. I have an amazing team delivering the day-to-day, and I spend most of my days on partnerships, on the marketing of the business, working out how we can do, I don't know if you saw our Deliveroo partnership.
So good.
These kind of weird, quirky, fun things that no one else has thought about, right? Because that's our USP. That's how we build our trench of defensibility, is by doing things that people haven't thought of before. So I've spent 5 years in the day-to-day, really in the nitty-gritty. In the last year or so, I've taken a bit of a shift in terms of role, and I've tried to take my head up and my eyes up to thinking about the big picture, because it's so hard, as you know.
Because you're driving that, and you've been driving it from the start, but kind of have to give yourself headspace to be able to drive it and figure out what's next.
Of course.
And that can't really happen when you're constantly problem solving.
Yeah. So
it's like that cycle, isn't it? That's hard to break.
You want to do both, right? You know, I find myself leaning to, I'm a problem solver, right? That's why I'm an entrepreneur. I want to solve people's problems, but I've hired people that are better than me now to solve those problems. So sometimes I find myself leaning too much back into the detail.
And it's hard when it's your baby to give up that control and say, okay, this is actually your role now, and I can't, because guess what? You're better at it than me. It's kind of a weird place to be in. I want to go back to what you were saying. So you've got this new system and you don't know how to work it, and you said it's a good and weird feeling at the same time. What feels good about it and what feels weird?
What feels good about it is that if I was building it, it wouldn't have looked as good. So our product team have done a way better job than I ever could. And what feels weird about it is that starting a business is so inherently you, right? It's your essence, it's your views, it's your hopes and your dreams, and you've got to hand that over. And I think I realised pretty early on that for this to be a successful business, I needed a big team of people that had done this before, that I could trust. And you could ask my team, I'm very hands-off. Once you're in and I trust you, you're in, and it's over to you. And I really hope my role now is providing that perspective that if things go wrong, it's not the end of the world. I sometimes joke, it's fashion rental. It's going to be okay. Like, we are going to be okay. But you know, people, especially like the younger generation that haven't had that experience of failure, it's my job to be like, okay, we'll pick up the pieces, we'll go again. Something goes wrong. Okay, what about this? And providing that level of perspective, I think, in the way that my mum did when I was starting out, when everything was the end of the world or the best day ever. that stability and that leadership is what I'm trying to take forward.
Which is really important. And I suppose that scale up for you, so you go from a couple of people in the basement, how many people are we talking now on the team?
We went, this is a few years back, from a team of 12 to nearly 40 in 3 months. So we have witnessed extreme scale. This was off the back of a funding round. So Octopus Ventures, they're one of my biggest shareholders. They were the early backers in Depop, have taken Depop, which I'm sure we all know from kind of Series A company all the way through to an exit to Etsy. So we have experienced extreme growth. We've also experienced times of not so much extreme growth. We've been through a global pandemic. I've had COVID where quite literally my revenue went to zero. It was the most single stressful time, and it went on for years and years and years. Well, what felt like years.
It felt like it, for sure.
So we really have gone up, we've gone down, we've gone up, we've gone down. And I think people have this perception that you grow a little bit every month.
And it just keeps growing.
5%, 10%, 20% month-on-month growth. That's what we're all here to do. It couldn't be further from the truth. And when I look back, we have pivoted the company so much. It is unrecognisable from the HURR I started, but in the best way possible. And I think that adaptability to be like, okay, we call them bright spots. We can see a bright spot in our Monday morning trade. Okay, that's really interesting. People are renting, literally this Monday, people are renting gold versus red this Valentine's Day. Really interesting. Have we got enough gold stock? Really weird trends. Let's focus more on that. Or we did a big partnership with Selfridges where they white labeled our technology. We went on to build Selfridges Rental. Okay, great. Let's focus more on that and still keep the main business running. So I think what we've done a good job of is finding those bright spots and then honing in on them and growing them too.
And that's a good leader, right? What do you find the hardest thing about, leading a team and, like you say, you're 40 odd people now? What do you find the hardest part about managing people and, dealing with everybody and emotions and, because of course, when you're a leader, you want to be in on the nitty-gritty and you want to problem solve, but that can sometimes be the hardest job. Sometimes there are days when it's hard to manage people versus the business.
Of course, it's a really interesting question. I think my answer would be around transparency as a leader. Transparency is a really interesting word, right? Because you want to be transparent, but not at the point where you might spook the team, right? And I think I've gone from being super transparent about everything that's going on and then actually realizing that sometimes that's not the most helpful strategy. We're venture backed, we've got big investors. Sometimes, we go through fundraisings that are super, super stressful. So how you tread that line of kind of honesty and transparency, I think is constantly changing for us. I think we've got the right balance now, but, you don't want to spook people that you might go bust in a few months. You also don't want to spook people that, we might be going through a massive growth spurt because we're about to take on more money into the business. So how you kind of day to day manage that, I think, is interesting. My second answer would be, and I don't know if you find this, how do you balance the short term? I report to my investors every 30 days, right? They're looking at my numbers, every single KPI. There are over 120 KPIs every 30 days, how we're tracking. How do you balance that pressure with the long-term vision of what you're trying to build, right? Because they don't always go hand in hand.
That to me is the hardest thing.
So hard. Short-term goals. I know I can quick fix my growth numbers in the next 30 days by doing X, but is it aligned to where I want to be medium and long-term? So I think that is a team-wide decision. That used to be my decision. I used to kind of go on a gut instinct and give it a go. Now I think it's much more of a kind of C-suite, my heads of decision about trade-offs, right? And bringing people into that fold of decision making versus just you making those decisions in the early days.
We've all made a decision that we think, oh, that probably wasn't great for the long term, but it felt right in the moment. And it actually, looking back on last year, that actually wasn't quite right. And I should have probably honed into our values a little bit more. Not necessarily your values as a brand, because you always lead by that example, but things that actually haven't helped that long-term growth and where you want to end up.
100%. I can name probably 5 10 examples where we've made the wrong decision, the wrong trade-off. I think the one thing I've learned is that the times I've gone against my gut instinct, we've been wrong.
100%.
And maybe I've been pushed to make a decision or persuaded to make a decision, and then retrospectively it hasn't been the right one, and in my gut I have felt that it wasn't right. And now I think, having gone through lots of failures, lots of things that we should have done differently, I'm not a very reflective person, which I think is also helpful. I'm very focused on what's next, because running a business, it's so all-consuming. I need to focus on the next 30 days, the 90 days. There's no time. So we can either look back and cry about the things that have gone wrong, or we can laser focus on what we've learned, what we would do differently next time, and give it a go again.
And are you like that in the moment, or do you find it hard to sort of, because sometimes it can feel like a hole that you're like, okay, we need to get through this. And once we've got through this moment, we're going to be okay. This is where I find the kind of emotional balance when you're responsible for a team, when you're in a situation where you're like, okay, this needs to happen. I'm still leading, so I want to give everybody a boost at the same time, but we're going to get through this. And I know that there's the bigger picture and it will be okay.
Yeah. But
do you find it hard to sort of, like personally, I suppose this isn't necessarily as a leader, at the time if there's something happening, because I am trying to get better at this, I take things quite personal. And just because that's naturally, and not necessarily in a way that I would react, I'm very considered and I'm very level-headed, but something will sit on me until I feel like I've got every last drop of it out. And then I'm good. And then I'm like, hang on, we're not talking about that. But privately at home, my husband will hear about nothing else. My close people will hear about nothing else until I feel like it's fully gone. And it might only be like 2-3 weeks. Yeah. But I'm all consumed until I feel in a better place. Are you like that, or are you instantly in the moment, are you able to just go, okay, this is happening, but it doesn't matter because we're going here?
I think I'm probably fairly good at being on or off, and also knowing when to cut our losses, right? So is the data showing me that this is a stupid decision, or actually is it promising? Is my gut instinct telling me this is not the right thing, or it is the wrong thing? I think maybe it's partly that I've been in this game for a number of years and I don't have the energy and the emotional highs and lows that I once did. But I think when I think about the best leaders that I admire, they're very stable and steady with their decision making and with their kind of manner in terms of how they lead. And I think from going from 25 to 31, I've gone from being like, yeah, let's go.
Oh, so much changes.
To being like, okay, let's give it a go. Yeah, you're right. In my private time, when I'm confiding in people that I trust, oh, is this right? Is it not right? Sometimes, it's really personal, right? When it's you've made the wrong call, but you don't want to show people that it's the wrong call, right?
We're doing the right thing, but it's that thing at home where I'm like, oh my gosh, it's that when I kind of have time to sort of self-reflect. That I need to have that thing that snaps me out of it. Because I've made a decision, perfect, it's happening. It's moving on. And it's more that I have to, like, is there something you have to do for you? Like when you come in, you said you had a bit of a sabbatical, which is one that was needed. Like I kind of have to make sure I really focus on my health, or focus on, deep dive into exercise, or I have to take those moments for me when I feel like the pressure's all a little bit consuming.
100%. I walk my dog every morning, and then I try and do a very short workout at some point during the day, whether that's after that, before that, in a lunch break, or later in the evening. And I don't listen to music. Sometimes I listen to podcasts, but I don't listen to music. I just am alone with my thoughts, trying to think about the day ahead, yesterday, what happened, and my iPhone notes. If you went into my iPhone notes, you'd think I was crazy.
I think they're all exposing.
I think they're all exposing, right? That for me, if it's like this morning, 4:30 a.m., had an idea, wasn't sure about something, wrote it down on my phone, went back to bed. So writing things down is kind of my form of therapy. And then also, I'm a very social person. I like bouncing ideas off people, but I've also learned that to be alone with your thoughts, even if it's for 40 minutes, 50 minutes a day, kind of takes me down and makes me a bit more kind of steady before I unleash chaos.
That's so funny. I like that, because you need to self-process, don't you, before you're like, guys, this is amazing. How do we do this? How do we take it on? Because I find that I kind of have that brain where I get so excited about the next thing, and I'm I'll have that moment. I'm like, guys, I figured it. This is what we're going to do, and this is how we should do it. And then I'm all systems go. This podcast was one of those. I was like, we have to do it, and this is how it's going to be. And it become like, the thing that then took priority, but actually I need to sometimes just settle that before I'm all guns blazing on how to get there.
For sure. You told me you built the set in 3 days, right? I can imagine. You come into the office, it's a new idea, it's go, go, go. And I think sometimes that's distracting for a team, right? So I've got a bit better at being like, okay, prioritize.
Yeah, be alone with those thoughts before you get the kind of megaphone out and start blurting out how this is going to go. I want to discuss a little bit about successes and challenges, because from the outside it seems like I've watched HURR's growth along with everybody else, and it seems to have just sort of catapulted, and it seems to have really caught the eye of the customer, and I think in a way that is quite hard. It's quite hard to execute that. With success always comes challenge, because that's just the nature of the beast, right? Is there a particular high that feels like the highest high for you, and a low that feels, something that you are so pleased that you overcome?
So high for me was definitely raising our first big round of funding. It was a different environment. VC has changed a lot since then, but I always wanted some of the best investors in the world to believe in the business and to kind of prove to myself, but also to the wider world, that HURR was as good as an Airbnb.
Pete. Let's not forget Pete at the start.
Yeah, that HURR could be as big as Airbnb, that HURR could be as big as Depop. And I was met with so many, not sure this is going to work, when we found investors that just got circular and understood what we were trying to build, and then actually funded that. That was a really exciting moment where it went from, is this a kind of, pipe dream, or is this actually what could be the next big business? So for me on a personal level, that was really important to prove that kind of the hard work that I put in to date was worth it. And I was only really getting started, but in lots of ways that was the kind of marker in the sand that I was going to go all in.
And where were you when you got that first call that you were like, okay, this is across the line, this is happening?
I wish it was like Dragon's Den, when you got a call and someone said, here's £4 million. It's a long process. Any founder that has raised money, it's a full-time job on top of a full-time job. So I remember getting our first term sheet, which is, we're putting that exact moment that you talk about. I was with Lauren, my number 2 at HURR, and I was like, is this happening? Is this true? Is this from Octopus Ventures? Is this really it? And then it's months and months of negotiation back and forth.
But you're getting that kind of
traction, right?
Yes.
And someone else saying, you're not crazy.
Yes.
We think this is a good idea. For me, that was really, really important, kind of intellectually and professionally, to be like, okay, the last couple of months and years of grind has been worth it. Challenges, I would definitely say COVID, as you can imagine. As we mentioned, not a good time to run a fashion rental business.
Where's anybody? Right? Where are they going?
No one's moving. And I remember looking at our Stripe account and literally watching cancellation, like thousands of cancellations, just our revenue pretty much going down to zero. Luckily, I have very supportive investors who really kind of believed in the long term of the business. We managed to do a bridge of finance to kind of keep us alive during that time. It was a really tough time to lead because no one knew the answers. My investors didn't know the answers. I didn't really know the answers. My inner circle didn't know the answers. Other founders don't know the answers.
Well, we've not lived through this.
We've never lived through it.
Pandemic before,
It was really, really wild looking back, right? We actually spent a year building a white label version of our technology. So you can rent and share your wardrobe on HURR.com. We then copied and pasted out our technology, which is where all of our value is in the business, and went on to launch Selfridges rental. And off the back of that, have launched a number of retailers. We've launched John Lewis, Net-a-Porter more recently. So it was the kind of third kind of feather in our cap. Took us a year to build at a time where we had zero revenue. So,
but it's so funny because we hear these stories, and particularly about that time, the pandemic and about COVID, that makes you think, okay, what's our other thing? What's the string to our bow that kind of, if we're ever in this situation again, we will be okay?
100%. And I think as bad and as horrible as COVID was for every founder and entrepreneur and everyone, I never thought, is this the right business to be building? I never questioned whether HURR should exist when we came out of a tier 2 lockdown, right? And I think that's really important. The days of self-doubt, you have to have such a deep belief that the business you're building is what you want to be doing with your time and is the right one. And if you've got that core belief, COVID.
That's it. Yeah.
Will come and hopefully it will go.
Yes, absolutely. And it did for you. It really did. I want to do our rocket round now, which is my favourite. So, first question. What are the non-negotiables, do you believe, for launching a business?
Complete self-belief and proven track record, and getting your MVP, so your minimum viable product, out into the world as quick and as cheaply as possible.
Okay, good. When did you first realise that you truly launched?
2019, the first piece of press we ever had was in the FT. I think my parents were more excited about it than I was.
That's a big one.
I could not believe it, a whole page. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is real.
This is happening.
Literally overnight.
And then did that, like, did your friends call? It's those moments, isn't it, where people that actually, we have the friends, we have those family members that, like, there are certain things that they notice. Like, you could be working and you're like, this is doing really well, guys, and we've had this investment. It won't really mean much to them, but you're like, FT, that did it, you know?
For me, that was a good one. That ticked a few boxes.
Yeah, exactly that. Family are happy. What do people usually seek your advice or help for?
Starting a business and then scaling it as well. I write a newsletter on just this. It's free.
Okay, oh, there you go. Thank you very much. What brand do you wish that you'd founded?
Airbnb.
Yeah.
They've really done a good job.
They have, haven't they? They really, really have. I mean, as her.
Hopefully.
Like you're in the same conversation. If you could choose one female figure as a mentor, past or present, who would it be?
Emma Green. She's the OG.
Isn't she just?
Yeah.
I know. I feel like she's everybody's mentor, like, from afar.
For sure.
Even just following her on Instagram, you're like, she's given me something today.
Yeah.
Bit of daily motivation.
100%.
If you could trade one of your current skills for a superpower that would help your business, what would it be and why?
Bit more attention to detail. I'd love to have a superpower where I could laser focus and not lose interest. I think I'm a bit scatty, kind of all over the place, trying to do everything all at once.
Right.
I've got better at being focused, but I would love a superpower where I could just lock into something. This is going to sound really boring, but read a legal contract from start to end in 3 hours and not find it boring.
Yeah.
That is really where
It's a superpower.
would love a superpower, or be engaged with the sensitivity analysis and the, scenario planning we're doing in an Excel, and everyone's telling me what to do. If I could focus a bit more, I've got better, but there's a superpower would help.
Yeah, that laser focus. You're so right. To things that you don't find as interesting. I'm with you there. Every episode, I ask our guests to leave a tip. Like, if they wish they would have known one piece of advice when starting out, whatever it is they do, what would that be?
I would say that consistency is the key to almost everything in life, in your personal life, in your professional life. Show up, take each day as it comes. Momentum builds momentum. You build and you build and you build every day. This does not happen overnight, and it is very much a marathon and not a sprint. Trust me, I've learned the hard way.
You're so right. And that consistency, like you say, doesn't have to be just applied to whether you're a founder or whether you're, looking for that promotion or in the workspace. It is literally with everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
Little by little. That's what I tell my kids. Like, just stay consistent. Stick to it.
No.
I have gone through every uniform for every club with my eldest daughter.
I'm sure, yeah.
And then she's seeing some of her friends now, like, they're doing really well at this, or they're, and like, because they went every single week, twice a week. Yeah. And that, let that be the lesson. Like, it's okay to try everything until you find your thing. But when you think you've got it, like, stay consistent, and then you will be at their level.
100%.
There you go. Life lesson. This is actually always my favourite question of the podcast, because I love to know how our guests spend their lunch hour. We talk about ladies who launch, but I'm very much a lady who lunches. I like to, as not as often as I'd like.
Yeah.
How does your lunch hour look every day at work? Do you step out for lunch? Are you at the office? Are you at your desk? And what is your order?
So about 2 years ago, I put in everyone's diaries across the business a lunch break from 1 to 2, because I realised we all just worked all hours of the day and there was no structure at all. And I started doing walking lunch meetings one-on-one, because very often you're spread so thin, right? One-on-one time can be really precious, and I want to get my steps in because I'm addicted to getting those steps in. So I walk around the park, and then we live near our office is near a big shopping centre, and we've got everything. We've got Pret, we've got Itsu, we've got Dishoom if we're feeling like a bit of a longer lunch.
Yeah.
So I normally have my walk for the majority of the hour, and then I have M&S sushi or a quick Pret.
Oh, okay, nice. M&S sushi, okay,
yeah,
that's
it's really
the
good.
choice.
They've got a really good sushi counter in some of the big ones. I'd recommend.
Thank you very much. I like that. We've had a lot of salads. We've had pastas. We've not had sushi yet. I love sushi too.
Sushi.
It's quick, easy, and always
Easy.
tasty.
Yeah, delicious.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong.
Well, thank you very much. This has been so insightful.
Thank you
From
for having
raising
me.
funds to scaling to M&S sushi. I've
we
loved
go.
it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Don't forget to follow us on Apple and Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts to make sure you don't miss out, because next week we're going to be talking to another incredible lady who launched. If, like me, you're a watcher, follow us on YouTube and don't forget to like and subscribe.